It's Chof Test, the 29th day. It's Erev Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Yeah. So technically today there's no moon. Before the moon is born, the moon has to vanish. It's ending to Chodesh Teves, it's Chodesh Shvat. And we're learning Tanya. That's what we're doing. And we're learning Tanya. This is Peidik Yud Bey. This is our third Shia on Peidik Yud Beis. We're in the bottom of page Tezayin Amud Bey. That means page 32. How many lines from the bottom of the page? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Amadaf. 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Aleph. We read some of this last week, but we're going to read from Avon. We're talking about something that's called...
Six from the bottom.
Yeah, Avon. The last word of the line is Avon. Something called Madrega Sabeinini. Madrega Sabeinini. There's Mida Sabeinini and there's Madrega Sabeinini. Madrega Sabeinini is a higher level than Mida Sabeinini. Because Madrega Sabeinini is a person, in the Yiddish expression, At via steht jetzt, as he is at this moment, is lei avar v'lei yavar. He never has done an aveda and will never do an aveda. In other words, Madrega Sabeinini is not just defined by his behavior, but by his mahus. Just like Madrega Tzadik is defined by his mahus, Madrega Sabeinini is defined by his mahus, by his substance, by his eichus. What's Madrega Sabeinini? And again, this is based on a note from our Rebbe in his Rishimis. Melucha Memshala. That's the code. Melucha Memshala. What's Madrega Sabeinini? Melucha Memshala. Melucha Memshala means sometimes a king and sometimes a dictator. A Beinini who was only a Moishel is Mida Sabeinini, not Madrega Sabeinini. A Beinini who was always a Melech, that's a Tzaddik. What defines Madrega Sabeinini is that sometimes he's Melech and sometimes he's Moishel. Melucha Memshala. That combination of Melucha Memshala categorized what's called Madrega Sabeinini. What's the criteria? What are the rules of Madregas of Melucha Memshala? This is a Yid who davens. And when he davens, he's mizbanyin in the Lakus. And when he davens and he was mizbanyin in the Lakus, he's me'edid, he wakes up, Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. And when he wakes up, Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, his Yetzirah is sleeping, like a tzaddik. His Yetzirah is asleep, shlaf, not bothering him. So obviously when a person is such a maimed matziv, that he's called a melech, he has no shaykhis terah, but he finishes davening, you see. And when he finishes davening, because he's a beinoni and not a tzaddik, the Yetzirah comes back. So the Yetzirah comes back, he falls from Madrega of Melucha, a king, and the definition of a king is Malchusei B'rotzen, that the guf wants to do what the melech wants, because the guf is inspired by what the melech is inspired by. That's what happens to a beinoni during the davening. After the davening, the melucha passes, the melucha subsides, but the memshala continues. He controls himself with the Kabbalah say. And since this beinoni goes back and forth from melucha to memshala and back to melucha again, you have later in Tanya, the Rebbe says, anytime a beinoni wants, he can daven. And anytime a beinoni wants, he can daven and wake up as Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So therefore, even when he's not davening, and his Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem are not revealed, it's called emes, it's not called sheker. The Alter says in Tanya, in the next Peidik. In Peidik Yud Gimel. But that's the category of beinoni that we're dealing with. It's called Madrega Sabeinini. And again, the code word for Madrega Sabeinini is this interface of Melucha Memshala. If you hear last Sunday, we talked about a melech, a beinoni during davening, and one of the points which was dominant in the class was the idea of Eis Ratzon. The correct, you have to daven at the right time, right? Yossi. We say it every day in Shacharis. By Mincha we don't say it. Mincha is not an Eis Ratzon except Shabbos. Shabbos by Mincha we say because it's a whole gvuris of Kedusha as opposed to gvuris which is the market of tests and all the other not Gevaldik Zachen. But in the morning, Shacharis, every single day you say Eis Ratzon, and the beinoni davens on time. It's an Eis Ratzon. And he davens the way he's supposed to daven, so he's out of sleep. He's in a category called Madrega Sabeinini. But he's only a beinoni. And I'm going to repeat myself one more time. If a person is a melech always, That's a tzaddik. A melech, always, it's a tzaddik. A person who's a moishel and not a melech, that would be midas habenini, which we're going to be learning about in Mitzvah Hashem in Perek Yud Daled. If a person is fluctuating, that sometimes during davening and so on, he's in the madrega of melech, and at other times in the madrega of moishel, this is the madrega habenini which Perek Yud Beis speaks to. That the fact that he actually arouses real feelings for HaKadosh Baruch Hu during davening, to the extent that at least while he davens, because Yetzer Hara sleeps, so even though after davening wakes back up, so this is called Madrega Sabein. Again, the expression is V'yer steht jetzt. As he stands now, the Alter Rebbe says, Lo Yovav Lo Yovav. He's a Beinani, but he Yetzer Hara. And nevertheless, we say he's never done an Aveda, even if he's done Avedas and done Tshuva for them. And more interestingly, he never will do an Aveda. If he has a Yetzer Hara, how can you make such a prediction? And the answer is, the way he stands right now, this healthy combination of Melucha and Memshala puts him to such a condition that if he just continues doing what he's doing now for the remainder of his life, he will never do an Aveda. This is what we learned. Okay, so now we're in the middle of this. Why are we in the middle of this? Because last week we learned the Melucha half. This week, and the next week's out of Yishvat, we'll see how we're going to do it. We're going to be learning the Memshala half. And I'm dafka dividing it into two shiurim. I'm splitting something up, which you can do together, because I want to give attention to each of the 2 points we're about to have. Okay? Let's understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a category of bein that's called madrege. Not mida, but madrege. What's madrege sabeini? A combination of melucha and memshala. When he's on, he's like a tzaddik. When he's not on, he has koyach. From the time that he was on to fight with his Yetzer Hara, even though he's not a tzaddik and his Yetzer Hara is bothering him, and then he's called a Moishel B'Shalit. And now the Rebbe is going to give two reasons, two parts to this guarantee. How do you know? How do you know? So here we go. Let's read inside. He finishes the daven, 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Page 32, Tezayin Amud Beis. Be'estalchus hamechen de gadlas dein sabar. Where there's a departing of what's called Meichen de Gadlus, the idea of Seichel, in a way of Gadlus. That means it's not just, this, when a person learns a Blat Gemara, and he learned it, and he struggled with it, and he understood it, and he come back to him a week later, say, remember last week we looked at Blat Gemara? He says, yeah, I talked about Kach V'Kach, think about this. When he recalls a week later that Blat Gemara, he can't go back over in all of its detail and all of its length and breadth and all of its lichtigkeit as he did a week before, because he's not there. He can just give you the point, in Yeshivish Sprach, in Chassidish Sprach. He can tell you the halacha, but the time of the halacha is not fresh, you understand? That would be the equivalent of Meichen de Katnus, as opposed to Meichen de Gadlus. The Alter Rebbe used the word Meichen de Gadlus. I don't think the Alter Rebbe means Meichen de Gadlus the way it means in Chassidus. Meichen de Gadlus means his seichel is greatly involved in understanding the Eibishter during davening. When he finishes davening, he's not thinking about the Eibishter, he's thinking about other things. He's still a Fruma Yid, he's still an Erlich Yid, he's still focused on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he shouldn't do an Aveda, he should do mitzvahs and so forth and so on. But his mind is not focused on his bonus and Eibishter to develop Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So when he finishes the davening, and his focus is not in a way of gadlus. Gadlus means oyrech v'rechev, mitafanem, in a detailed way into understanding of the kus and the feelings that understanding brings. Says the Rebbe, harei hara chayze v'neh. In this bein, he says he has a Yetzer Hara, the evil comes back and it wakes back up, b'cholol ha-smoli, in the left ventricle of his heart. And he has, now he does Avedis. He has a possibility to do an Aveda. He has a vulnerability to an Aveda. It can enter into his thought of Machshava Zoreh, Rachmana litzlan. Yes? This person can have desires, to the weaknesses, that's what we translate the word taiva, of this world and its pleasures. And I want to make a clarification. If you're familiar, we had this in Tanya Perek Ches. There's a taiva's hete, a permitted taiva for a beinani is not an aved. A taiva's isir for a beinani is an aved. So if you're familiar with the way the language of the Tanya goes, is azoi. That this beinani finishes davening. Says Meichen de Gadlus, whatever Meichen de Gadlus means, go away. His Yetzer Hara wakes back up from his sleep, and he can again desire, but there's a difference. Dvarim amutarim, a permitted taiva, he could not only desire it, he could actually think about doing it b'poil. He could actually want to do it actually, he just doesn't do it. Dvarim asurim, he thinks about the davar isir, but he doesn't want it. Because the dvar isir, wanting it, constitutes an aveda. You're going to see, I'm going to dedicate a whole shir to the whole shaila. When a machshava by a benyani is an aveda, when machshava by a benyani is not an aveda, later in the painting. I'm just saying it now, he has obvious taiva. Dvarim amutarim, he can actually want to do it, b'pil mamish. And Dvarim asurim, he doesn't want to do it, but he has it enters into his mind this inyan from taiva. Why? Because he has the Yetzer Hara. He's a normal person, he has the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara will for will. Yetzer Hara does what he wants, he goes in the direction he wishes to go. And this person, when he finishes davening, these things can happen. But he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it. He could do it. He didn't do it. The only thing is, mipnei, considering the fact, shaloi loi levade, not to him alone, that means not to the Yetzer Hara, to the Bahamas alone. Mishpat hamelucha v'hamemshala be'ir. When you finish davening, so this business of melucha memshala, Rebbe uses both words, is not in the hands of the Yetzer Hara. Which means, I guess you could say, even if you're going to say that the Yetzer Hara has melucha, but the Yetzer Tev could still have memshala, you're not going to say that the Yetzer Hara takes over the whole person. During davening, Yetzer Tev dominates the person. And after davening, Yetzer Hara dominates the temes. During davening, Yetzer Hara makes a person, and the Yetzer Hara is asleep. After davening, when the Yetzer Hara comes back up, but he doesn't put the Yetzer Tev to sleep. They fight. And I feel it, even if you're going to say that the Yetzer Hara has melucha, in other words, the esviltzach, you want what the Yetzer Hara wants, but you don't give in. Let's read. Mishpat hamelucha v'hamemshala be'ir, that the kingship or the dominance of the city doesn't belong to him alone. Okay? Why? Because the Yetzer Tev didn't die, but then he's a little bit weaker. And therefore, the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh Bahamis, that's weak and lustful, is not able to actualize its weakness, its desire. Mikech, from a potential state, alapel to an actual state. Lehislabish. Lehislabish means to be revealed, to invest itself. Be'evrei aguf, from the limbs of the person to do the avera b'pel mamish. B'maise in action, dibur in speech, umachshava in thought, mamish. And what would constitute a thought which is an avera? Lahamik machshavte betanugil mazet, to delve deeply into the thoughts of these worlds. Look at the next words. Eich lemales taives libe, to satisfy desire of the heart. In other words, one of the criteria that the Alter Rebbe is going to give for separating one kind of bad thoughts from another kind of bad thoughts, and there's going to be kama v'kama, is a difference between thinking about something and thinking about doing it. Thinking about doing it is an aveda. Thinking about it is lavdafke an aveda. So he says the Yetzer Hara gives you thoughts of the aveda, but he doesn't have enough balabatishkai to get you to think about doing it, just to think about it. And then you tell him, no, I'm not thinking about it. And of course you don't speak about it, and of course you don't act on it. So this Beinani, whose melucha has passed, during davening he was a melech, and the melech means, his Yetzer Hara was sleeping, it was not functional. Finishes the davening. The Yetzer Hara comes back, but it's not the reverse. Not that during davening, the Yetzer Tev had melucha and memshala, and after davening, the Yetzer Hara has melucha and memshala, because then he would be a Rasha. It's during davening, Yetzer Tev has melucha and memshala. After davening, even if the Yetzer Hara has melucha, but memshala he doesn't have, bottom line is, you don't listen to the Yetzer Hara. Why? Because even though the Yetzer Hara is chayzev v'neir, the Yetzer Tev is not done. He's still there. And the Alter Rebbe gives two explanations. How does it happen? He davened. And while he was davening, he was at a very high level. He was really in a different place. A Yid finishes the daven. He's no longer at a high level. The Yetzer Hara is on. This is his time. Now you're eating breakfast, whatever you're doing, and the Yetzer Hara thinks, oh, here's an opportunity, the Pesach Chatos Revitz, I'm going to get the Yid to sleep. And the Yetzer Hara is listening to him. I'm sorry, the person is listening to the Yetzer Hara. Yeah, he's making suggestions, but he just doesn't follow the suggestions. Why not? Because when the Beinani, who's in the Madrega Beinani, loses the Melucha, he retains Memshala. Yetzer Hara thinks, I'll give you davening, Melucha Memshala, Mistach Nachla Shnei Elamis, and after davening, you'll give me Melucha Memshala. And he says, no. During davening, I'm taking everything. After davening, What you can take, but I'm not giving you shlita. I'm not giving you memshala. In other words, you can make me want all kinds of things, and I want them, but I'm not going to act on them. I am not going to do them. And as long as the Yetzer Tov can affect the Yetzer Hara, that even when he loses his melucha, he holds on to his memshala. That's called madregas habenyani. You follow? You understand what I'm saying? And he makes two explanations. Two bases who are a Beinani, who's not davening anymore. He's so to speak given up his melucha, because melucha, that means that his kuf is filled with avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, because he has to go into the world. And he's a Beinani just on Mimshal. So how did he win? How does Taka, the Yetzer Tov, win over the Yetzer Hara? Two arguments. Argument number one. Key, the reason when the Beinani is reduced to only Memshala, Kabbalah Seil, and my Yetzer Hara is inundating me with Taivas Rois. The Yetzer Hara is bothering me with all kinds of very attractive things that I enjoy. I just don't give in. Why? Reason number one, Hameach Shalat Alalev. The mind is shoylet, doesn't say moilech, it says shoylet alalev, right? What's that shalit? The brain can control the heart without kinging. Now let's explain. When a person davens, the brain is not controlling the heart. The brain is educating the heart. When you're davening and you say moyach shalat alalev, the word shalat is really a misnomer. When you're in the middle of davening, it's hamelach hamoyach moilech alalev. Because when I'm davening, my heart wants what my brain is teaching. Because my heart also desires the Eibishter, just like my mind desires the Eibishter. When do you say melech moyach shalit alalev, and the diuk is shalit, and not moilech after davening? So I saw the Maimon Ein Beis Beferish, where he brings the lashon moyach shalit alalev, the very first Maimon Hemshech Ein Beis. He brings the idea moyach shalit alalev, and he describes that when a Beinani davens, even though we use the word shalit, it's not shlita, it's melucha. When a Beinani davens, you don't say the brain controls the heart. You say the brain and the heart are on the same team. The heart desires what the brain understands. After davening, where the melucha subsides, and the Yetzer Hara comes along with his melucha, and his melucha is considerable, his melucha is formidable, his melucha is very real, his melucha is very negeya, and you don't listen to the Yetzer Hara. So now you're surviving. Now you're not listening to Yetzer Hara, not because moilech alalev. It's enough shalit. Shalit means I don't have a geshmak and a lakus, but I don't have to listen to the Yetzer Hara either. Right now, I'm not filled with avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, but I do have an ability to tell my Yetzer Hara no. Why? Right? But I'm the Pashas Pinchas. First of all, Adish the Zayar. The Zayar says this. Moyach shalt alev, and let's talk it over again. The diuk is, it doesn't say moyach moilech alalev. Moyach moilech alalev, everybody understands. Moyach shalt alev, the Zohar tells you that when you're off, you're still on. Huh? When you don't have, you're not fully involved in the lakus, you're out of the real world, there's shlita. Not melucha, there's shlita. There's enough Kabbalah Seil. What's the magic word? The next one. Bituldase v'teva yetziras. From birth and the teva, the nature of how the Eibishter formed us. Okay, this is very important words. Shekach neitzer ha'adam b'tildas. This is how Hashem formed man when He gave birth to him. And when you're talking about teva, right? What's the opposite of teva? I know this is so random. Every day a different thing, yeah? The opposite of teva is avoida. You work to change yourself. Before you started to work, before you began to change yourself, there's your nature. We're dealing with this. Your teva. We're dealing with your nature. We're not talking about avoida. We're talking about the teva. Let's read. Shekol Adam, every person, Yachal is free as able. With the will in his mind, lihis apak, to hold himself back, to control himself. To dominate the spirit of weakness. We translate the word taiva as weakness in one's heart. Not to satisfy what your heart wants. To do what you shouldn't do, to say what you shouldn't say, and to think what you shouldn't think. And then he adds one more line. Ulasiyach daite legamri. Take your mind away from it completely. Mitayvas libe, from the weaknesses of your heart. Come to the other side. The Zohar says, and now Rebbe puts the words right in the middle of the thought. Now why you have to put the Maramokim Chal, since when the Alter Rebbe is not a sefer of Maramakemis? The Tanya does not bring B'derech Klal sources. And he puts it right in the middle of the thought. That's the whole quote. So between the word Halev and B'todase, he throws an Azay Shteit in Zayar, and I think the reason he does this is because when the Zayar says it, the Zayar has to be taken very seriously. The Zayar says that there's something called Tulda, which is the way you're born. There's something called Teva, which is your basic nature. This is not Avoida. And that's enough. That's the first Chiddush of the Beinani in the state of Memshala. Or the Beinani in a state of Shlita. His Yetzirah, Yetzirah is no longer a king over the Guf. That's only during davening and learning. Davening. He's finished davening. The king has given way to a dictator. Now I have to control myself. I'll tell it to you before I finish the Shir. The story is not negated directly to the Shir, but I'll tell it to you anyway in conclusion. Yeah. But you can control yourself with your teva and your tulgu. This is what the Alter Rebbe says. This is important. Important. What's important is that we should serve Hashem and be from an Erech Chassidish Yidden. We come to learn Tanya, not to hear about somebody else. We come to learn Tanya to hear about ourselves. Not every word in Tanya speaks directly to us. It speaks to us indirectly. But what it says in the Sefer Tanya Kedisha, what we're learning here, is that a Yid is a tulda and a Yid is a teva. This is very, very important.
What's the difference?
Between tulda and teva? Okay, let's say I don't know. Face it. The Klolos is the same thing. You're born with a certain nature. The reason there are two words is because you could ruin what you had from Tulda, and then you can recreate a Teva Sheni. But now you started getting to the whole question of Teva Rishon and Teva Sheni. So let's just say we don't know. Yeah? Now you see, you agree we don't know. So better we don't know. Okay, this is very sadistic. It's fun. It's really, really fundamental. I'll give you an example from Siddur. I'm giving you an example from Siddur. I don't know why I'm giving it from Siddur, but I like Siddur, so I'm giving it from Siddur, yeah? Every day in Vayevarach David, you say, Ata hu Hashem Elokeinu, right? Ata Asisa Shemayim. Shmei HaShemayim. Ha'or v'chosher aleha. Hayam v'chol asher behem. Right? You say every day, you created alles. V'ata machayes kula. You give life to them. And then it says, Tzva means the hosts, the chevre, the situation. Tzva hashamayim, the hosts of heaven are bowing to you. What's the point of these words? Tzva hashamayim l'chol mishtachavim. What's the pshat? Tzva hashamayim l'chol mishtachavim. Why don't you say Utzva l'chol mishtachavim? Ata asisas hashamayim. Ata asisas ha'aretz. Hayam, Hashem created the heaven, Hashem created the earth. And He gives life to all of them. And Tzva ha'aretz is nisht. Only Tzva Hashamayim. And there's a very important text to this kasha. And when you learn the Maimonides Chassidus, not all the Maimonides Chassidus are explaining this aspect of the word. But all the Maimonides Chassidus allude to it, at least indirectly. The heavens bow to the Eibishter. You know why? It's their nature. Hashem made the world. Hashem gives life to the world. And a part of the world bows down. But you have to understand, that part of the world that's bowing down, you know what's bowing down? Because it doesn't know what else to do. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? A human being on earth can bow down to who knows what. But a human being on earth who chooses to bow down to the Meivish, that's not Atah Siso. That's Atah Hu Hashem Elokeinu Shabachata B'Yavra. It's not going to happen by itself. Utzva Hashamayim L'chom Mishtachavim has a huge upside and a huge downside. Utzva Hashamayim L'chom Mishtachavim is if you're a star and in the sky you're going from east to west. You're bowing to the west because Shechina B'Mayda, like it says in Sfarim. Why? It's your nature. Is that good or bad? It's the moshel of going to the car wash, right? You come to the car wash and they give you two choices. You want to go on a track where you put your car in neutral and they schlep you through, or you could go in drive and you get to choose how fast you want to go to the car wash. You can go through certain parts faster or slower. In the heavens, everything is on a track. The Malach, the Tzva Shamayim is Malachim Beklalos, are in neutral. And they go on a track. And they bow to the Meibishter. Why do they bow to the Meibishter? The same way you eat breakfast, you breathe. Because it's your nature, they bow to the Meibishter. Good thing or a bad thing? It's nice. It's better to bow to the Meibishter than to bow to something of a Zora. But there's no avoider. This is the Teva of the Tzva Shamayim. It's the nature of the Tzva Shamayim. A Yid on earth, if he's going to follow his Teva, it's not going to be good. Even though it says in Tanya Perechas that the Teva of a Yid is not so terrible, but the Teva of a Yid can get lost. But when you combine Melucha and Memshola, Teva is enough. What's the word Teva? Shameach shalt alalei, what's the meaning of the word Teva? This is the nature of a person. The nature of a person is not avoida. Avoida is to change the nature, to exceed the nature. That's what happens when the Beinin davens. When the Beinin davens and he makes himself into a melech, that's not his teva. That's his avoida. But he finishes davening and he goes out into the world. Now you have to mention in small words, as a Yishtilikate and Einwarfen, and you're dealing with a Beinani. Which means that he's not someone who yesterday didn't have Eire or last week didn't have Eire. For a Rasha, for a Baal Tshuva, this is not going to work. You're dealing with a person who in his life never did an Aveda. And the way he stands now in his life, he never will do an Aveda. When this person goes away from Melucha, he goes away from Avodah, and he goes out into the world, it's enough for him to be a Beinani based on his nature. The Teva of a human being is not to be an animal. Now, if you'd walk the streets, you would say, "Man, that doesn't sound right." Tanya says, the Zoya says, the Teva of a human being is to be a mensch, nicht a behemoth. To walk upright and not to walk on all fours. And I don't mean this physically. The Teva of a human being is to go to what's Mu'ula Ba'atayv. You have a mind, use it. If I can be busy with my seichel, or I can be busy with my nihi, with the lowest part of my body, of course I'm going to choose the higher. Why? That's my Teva. The Teva of a person is to go to what's higher rather than what's lower. This is not avoida. It's just like Tzva Hashamayim L'chamishtachavim. You're not going to say to the Malach, Ayashakoyach, you bow down to the Eibishter. He's on a track. His gear is in neutral and it's broken. You can't push him to drive, you can't push him to reverse. It's stuck in neutral. And the Eibishter feared them. So he bows to the Eibishter. And the Shama B'guf in this world is not that way. Shama B'guf in this world has free will. And he can make mistakes. And he can also do tshuva. And so on and so forth. But this neshama has a teva. And this was discussed the first time it came up in Tanya, and I made such a big deal out of it. In Tanya chapter 8, the first few lines of Tanya chapter 8, the Alter Rebbe says to you a chiddush gadol b'yesod, an incredibly big chiddush. It's important. It's very important to understand. And I'm going to repeat it now. Okay? The Alter Rebbe, the first few lines of Perek Ches, so the first few lines of chapter 8, introduces you to something called Shade Mishadin Yehudoyin and Shade Mishadin Nuchroyin. Shade means a ruach, a spirit, a living thing. And Shade Mishadin means a Yiddish shed, a Jewish spirit. Shade Mishadin Nuchroyin means, Nochri means a friend. Nochri doesn't mean a goy. It means not a Yid. So we assume the Shkayid is a goy. Nochri meant a fremde. Lekei necha meant a fremde God. This is a goyish God. Alien. He's not part of the paradigm of Yehudi. What the Rebbe says, the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh HaBahamis of a Yid has a Teva. We're not talking Nefesh HaLakis now. We're not talking Nefesh HaLakis. Because Nefesh HaLakis and Teva don't come together. B'chlal HaLakus and Teva are opposites. When you're talking about a lakus, Teva's klippah. When you use the word Teva, you're not talking about Nefesh HaLakis. No. You're talking about the Nefesh HaBahamis. The Teva of the Behema of a Yid. A Baal Taiva is it. He likes to enjoy life. But then Aveda is repulsive to him. The Teva, this is the first few lines of Perek Ches. If you don't believe me, I'm very happy. Turn back and read it yourself. The Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh HaBahamis of a Yid B'Teva, has no desire to do an Aveda. But if it's kosher, he wants to. Taivas heter he wants. Taivas iser beteva has no life. That's what the Rebbe says in Kuntas Amayim. When we learned it, I told it you. In Kuntas Amayim, Maimed Beis, Peirikal, the Rebbe Rashab starts with a kasha. How can you do an Aveda if the Rebbe writes in Tanya that the Ted of the Nefesh HaBahamis doesn't want Avedas? The Rebbe Rashab in the Kuntas Amayim, the famous Kuntas Amayim, the second Maimed, the first lines, is asking this question. If the Yetzer Hara of the Nefesh HaBahamis of the Yid B'Teva doesn't want to do an Aveda, how's he do an Aveda? And the answer that he gives there is Taivas Heter. If you indulge in permitted Taivas, which you do have a desire for, you become dull, and you can cross over from a Heter to Issa. He brings the Lashon HaGemara, Hayei Meimele Asei Kach Idakash Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara's technique is Hayei Meimele Asei Kach. It's kosher, has a good hechsher. Glad, kosher, 2:12. He says the teva of a yid, the teva, which means the nefesh habahamis of a yid, can't do an aveda unless you desensitize it. It starts with heter and it goes over to is. You understand? But if you never did an aveda and you never allowed yourself taivas, we're talking about a beinani. His teva is enough. His teva is enough. That's what it says here. A beinani who's the madrega of madregas a beinani. It's a higher level of beinani, which means he fluctuates between melucha and memshala. When he's a melech, he basically has no yetzer hara. When he's not a melech, his teva is enough. And we're talking teva of the nefesh habahamis, because nefesh elokis and teva don't go in the same plate. Elokus and teva are opposites. Elokus and teva are opposites by definition. Now in Tanya you have the teva of the nefesh elokis. We're starting today Perek Yud Ches. It's a whole nother use of the word teva. The Rabbi says that if you use the word teva, when you can't explain something, you use the word teva. But we don't mean that over here. Over here we mean teva limitation, or containment. The teva of the nefesh habahamis of a yid betudasei beteva yitzirasei is me'ach shalt al. That's all. The mind is stronger than the heart. Now, if you give in to the heart today and tomorrow and next week, and then in a month you wake up one day and say, "Oh, I want to have my teva," me'ach shalt al, it's corrupted. That doesn't work. Me'ach shalt al works if you didn't ruin the teva. You know, they used to give animals. They did experiments. They gave animals food that's not healthy for them, but that it tastes good, like candies and sugars that people eat. You know, the way they explain it in science, and when you eat bad food, it creates appetite. When you eat sugary foods, it makes you hungry when you're really not hungry. When you eat healthy food, besides the fact that it's healthy for you, you feel like you don't need to eat anymore. Most animals don't eat it. They just don't want it. The chimpanzees do. They're too smart for their own good, so they can become balei taiva and they can get sick. Most animals, if it's not good for them, they don't want it. Even if they taste it, and it tastes good, they just feel nish good. It's like a person who's very careful about diet, who one day eats bad food, gets a stomachache. It's not nish. That's called teva. But the teva can be corrupted, you see. And when the teva is corrupted, then to get it back is a whole avodah. But we're dealing with a beinani. And we're dealing specifically with madregas a beinani. So the Rebbe says, I want you to know how it works. A person who does what the Eibishter wants and doesn't do against the rest of the Eibishter, when he needs, his nature will hold him, his teva. The teva of the nefesh habahamis does not have any desire for an aved. The teva of the nefesh habahamis, moyach shalet alev, the cold brain is stronger than the impassioned heart, not because cold is stronger than heat, but because this is the teva. The teva is, the brain says, listen, du bist ein Mensch, nicht kein Balchayu, you're a being and not an animal. And the heart is saying, why not enjoy being an animal? It feels very, very good. And the me'ach shalt alev b'tudasei b'teva. That's what we read here. And I'm obsessed to giving you over the Tanya like it's written. Now, of course, you're going to say, so what does that do with me? So what does it do with me, I'm not going to tell you. What does it do with you, Mr. Everybody relates to what's written over here. But this is the correct pshat of these few lines. Moyach shalt al alev is b'teva. And the kids miss this. You speak to the kids, Moyach shalt al alev, they say, my mind can rule over my heart. And then you start asking them questions. You really? You come to L'chaim, and there's this and this food, and you wanted it very, very much. Moyach Shalt Alev works every time. You tell yourself, my brain tells me, and they say, no, I Taki, you're right. So what's Taki? The answer is last week, did you give in? 2 weeks ago you gave in. The Moyach Shalt Alev is a tema if you don't corrupt it. By a Beinani. Because the Bein doesn't give it to Yetzer Hara when he has no koyach to fight with Yetzer Hara. His teva is sufficient. His nature is enough. And you know how it plays out in our lives? You know how it plays in our lives? We're not Bali Taiva for every single thing in the world, you know? Not everybody wants every desire. L'moshel, I have no desire whatsoever to eat today for fish. Well, don't push it there. Today for fish. Crustaceans. Yeah. So if someone said to me, why don't you try it? It tastes so good and it's so tender. All the things they say about today for fish. Yeah. It's like, oh, and everybody else is eating it. So then it's possible that they can talk to me, and I'll say, no, I don't want it. Why not?
That's an Averis.
Huh?
That's not Taiva.
We're talking about Averis. We're talking the whole word of Teva is you don't do an Averis. If I have no predisposition towards that, but in other words, you could be like a tzaddik in one prat, like a beinani in one prat, a Aveda which I've never committed, and it's outside of my personality type to be leading in this direction. I once met a person who's from for 40 years, and they still have a craving for these Dvar Masur. And they were a girl when they became from. It's the nature of a person. For that particular human being, food is very important. Food, b'klal, is very important. And they remember how it tastes. And it's mamish, they walk by a shop, and it's glust 40 years of Shemeretah or mitzvahs above. It's how it is. Everybody has different dispositions. But something which is not part of your nefesh of hamish is chush. Not everybody likes everything. Yeah? Some people love music. So music is in a soil. Some people don't give it, doesn't mean anything to them. You know? So you offer them taste, you say, oh, it tastes better than, it's geschmacked than kosher music. Yeah. The teva is enough. The teva of moyach shalt alev works when you have no koyach. Teva is sufficient. In those areas where you don't have a record, where you don't have a past, and a beinani, who's a madrigas beinani, that teva works for everything. You understand? That's the literal taich. Meir shalt alev, kamesha kosta, but I'm the pashas pinchas. Betuldosei v'tevi, yitzatrebbe throws in a mucker. You should know the Zayah says this. That a person can fall back on his nature, he has no drive. Fighting against his Yetzer Hara, his teva is enough. The Eibishter made us human. And a human being, but teva doesn't want to be an animal until he animalizes himself. So a beinani has not animalized any part of himself. So in every area that teva can work. A person who in some areas is been compromised because of his past, but in other areas that teva is enough. And that's the taich melucha memshala. But somebody called madrigas beinani. Madrigas beinani. He's not doing beinani, he is a beinani. What's taich madrigas beinani? That we say the way we state yes at this moment, he's never done an aveda, will never do an aveda. How? Melucha memshala. What's melucha? Periods of his life, of his day, when he's like a tzaddik. What's memshala? That his nature, and I'm saying again, we mean befeder the nature of the nefesh habahamis is enough to be shalt al alev. That's today's shir. Tomorrow, that means next Sunday, we're going to learn ubefrat al tzaddik kedusha. There's another argument, a stronger argument for why melucha memshala works. You can look at a person who's only a beinani with a Yetzer Hara, and you can say the way he stands now, he's never done an aveda, never will do an aveda. So today we learned the first key to memshala. Last week we learned melucha. This week, and the next week, we're going to be learning memshala. He's not davening. He's in the world. What keeps him then? So the first thing is his tava is me'ach shalt alev. Next week we're going to learn the second inyan, and I dafka dividing it up into two. I'm stretching it because I want to give each one of these 2 points a Sunday bifnei atzmei, because it's very important to hear the pshat and Tanya. The pshat in Tanya, moyach shalt alev, the key in the phrase moyach shalt alev is not the word moyach, it's not the word shalit, it's not the word lev, it's the word teva. And you listen to teenagers, they don't even notice it. Because moyach shalt alev sounds easy. Moyach shalt alev is a lie. Unless it's your teva.
Unless it's what?
Your teva. In an area where you are not compromised, teva is enough. In an area where you're compromised, moyach shalt's not going to work. You tell yourself not to eat another piece of chocolate, you're going to stop. Do me a favor. Cool alma. Yadein is benafshe. Yeah, you have to look in the mirror. I have to look in the mirror.
Change it.
But that's an avoida. That's already a job. Now, I promise to tell you a ma'aseh. I heard the story from Zangus Rabbi Yankel Shrei, but it's a ma'aseh for semis. I'm just telling you the story because it's a geschmack of ma'aseh. It's not so negay to the shir, but mir will sich erzählen der ma'aseh, und ich gebe sich noch a Teive. Der Rebbe hat a Chosser, der geheißen der Pesach Molostovke. The Pesach Molostovke. Molostov is a city, Mr. The Pesach Molostovke is considered the youngest of the Hasidim of the Alter Rebbe. I don't know for sure, but I'm guesstimating he was around the same age as the Hill, Parachid. But the Hill was considered a Chassid of the Middle Rebbe. And the Pesach was considered a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Now I'm not going to say that the Pesach was standing harder than the Hill, Parachid. But the difference between the Alter Rebbe's Hasidim and the Middle Rebbe's Hasidim is gargantuan. It's beyond understanding. The Alter Rebbe's Chassidim sind ein gewinn ganze Menschen. The Alter Rebbe's Chassidim were healthy people. They were great Chassidim and they were also normal. But the normal was not pure, the normal was Chassidus. Sai Moyach, Sai Lev, gewinn ganze Menschen. The Middle Rebbe's Chassidim were Bali Mesidus Nefesh. Their life was very, very hard. But not many of them, you could say, were whole people. In other words, they had Chassidus in other areas because of Avodah. Well, not because of Avodah, but Alter Rebbe's Chassidim was Shalei Ba'erech. Alter Rebbe's Chassidim is really in a category by itself. So the story with the Pesach Molostovka was the following. He was a Rav, a Mashpi in Molostov, I think, Molostov, I don't know, whatever. I don't know Russia and I don't know Russian, but you're not arguing with me, so I'm happy. Anyway, there was a Maisa once, a long story, where he protected a young girl from a group of soldiers. He attacked them. So they ran after him. They let her go, they ran after him. And they were going to kill him. So he ran up into an attic. And there was a bunch of barrels. And some of them were full with whatever it is, with preserve, yeah. With pickles, or whatever people had preserve. And the Americans don't know what that means, preserve.
A bunch of what?
Barrels. Cutting. So, everybody wanted to eat food in the winter. You pickled your herring and you pickled your pickles. Everything was pickled. It stayed fresh. And he found an empty one and he climbed in. And he closed the lid. They came in after him. He embarrassed the sergeant. She was about to do an Aveda, you understand? But he had a uniform. And he went opening up the barrels. And he wasn't in any of them. So in frustration, he took his machete, he was zets on a barrel, and he was in that one. And he gave him a good popping cup. Oh, you know what? I'm telling you the wrong story, but I'll tell you both mices already. This is not the story I wanted to tell you. So this is the mice, the hill was the mice that he had these headaches. I think this is how the story goes. So he came to the middle Rebbe. So he told me he should wash his head in hot water. The headaches went away. The middle Rebbe was nostalgic, the headaches came back. So he came to the Tzemach Tzedek, he told him to wash his head in cold water. Tzemach Tzedek was nostalgic, so the headaches came back. He went to the Rebbe Marash, and he told him to mix hot water and cold water and wash his head, and the headaches went away. This is the story, but it's not so again. The story, there's two stories. I'll finish this one already, yeah? When he was old, he was in a book, the basics. He didn't have full control of his mind. And people attributed it must have been a good zetz. He was a zetz. You know, a zetz, we are going to get him a zetz. He was not fully aware of his mind. So he would forget if he davened. And the Pesach Molostovka's davening was not like my davening or your davening. It was a mice of a Sean. He davened. So he'd go to shul in the morning, up davening, he would come home, and forget that he davened, and he went back to shul davened again. And there was nobody in shul to tell him in a Pesach, he had a chain gedavened, and he would daven twice. I remember him, 4 o'clock in the morning, he was walking to shul. It was midnight. So you would tell him it's too early, so he would laugh, he would go home. Then he would come 6 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock, right now, so again, shul davening. Unless somebody kept track, he was a Yiddish Shamayim Be'etzim, not Be'poil. So when he wasn't sure, he'd daven twice. I remember we used to stop him. It's too early. He would laugh, he would go home. Or you davened already, he would laugh and you go home. Anyway, so Pesach would daven Tzvei. So they would say to him, the Pesach, can you daven Tzvei? So he would say, as Pesach soll daven in Tzvei Mo ken treffen. Or but a Pesach soll nicht daven and das ken nicht treffen. That was his answer. He says, that I should daven twice is a strong possibility. But that I shouldn't daven, impossible. That I shouldn't daven, not sure. Anyway, this is not the story I wanted to tell. The story I wanted to tell was that when he lived, he was a presence. He raised up everybody around him, like any real chassid. And there was a machashef. Nearby there was a goy who had koiches of tumah. And he I don't know how you do these things. I don't understand voodoo and black magic, but it's a real thing. I mean, Tanya speaks about it. And the Pesach felt that in Kopis Veran Avorim, that something is wrong, that something is really not right. Beruchnius, in an Oifem Pnimi, something we touched his neshama, not just his mind. So after you gave him Hoshta Eitzah, he came to Rebbe, came to the Tzemach Tzedek. And he told the Tzemach Tzedek that in my head there's something not right. So the Tzemach Tzedek picked up an apple. And he said to him, to the Pesach, Zog Yechob nicht holt. Say I don't like it. Say I don't like it. Say if he would have been Deir Shvi, he would have said I don't like it. That would have been the end of the story. But he wasn't Deir Shvi. And I don't know what the right answer is when it comes to such things. So he says, Rabbi Yechob holt. I can't tell you I don't like it. I desire it. So the Tzemach Tzedek said a second time, Zog Yechob nicht holt. So he says, Rabbi Yechob holt. It went back and forth. Many times, and at a certain point, the Rebbe said, Rebbe Yechob nicht holt, I hate it. And then whatever demons were in his head went out. That's the story. I'm talking about the way you tell it. Okay, let's break and we'll do Hayem Yem. Okay, good morning. No. I'll just tell you this, that Bechlal in the Zohar is preeminently in Bereshis and Shmois. If you ever saw Zohar, there's 3 volumes. Bereshis, Shmois, the Yikra, Minvar goes in one krach. The reason is because the Zohar, we don't have the whole Zohar. We have only what we found. And the Mesader of the Zohar was not Mesuder by Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. The Zohar was Mesuder by someone much, much later. So most of the Zohar he put in the Bereshis Nishmeis. But Yikra Bidl Dvarim, some patches you only have Raya Mehem. In other words, it goes through mitzvahs. Raya Mehem is the Zohar Sefer HaMitzvahs. So you look in certain patches, you only have Raya Mehem, the first mitzvah, second mitzvah, third mitzvah, fourth mitzvah. I don't remember patches Pinchas if it's that way. Okay.